Hey guys, welcome back. It's my weekly painting update, and like I mentioned before, I know that I missed last week's video. That was just due to family and actual work, but I'm very happy to be back and sharing with you 6 amazing miniatures that I finished for Talisman. And these models I'm extremely happy to share, just because I felt like I pushed my painting a little bit. Some parts I had to kind of learn and do on the fly, so let me go focus on each model. So the first model I really want to share with you guys is the Talisman Samurai, and this model is a little bit special. Sam, my fiance, actually bought me this miniature for my birthday this year, and it meant a lot having her spend time looking for miniatures that she knows I want to play with, and especially old hammer miniatures. I'm really lucky that she didn't buy a miniature I already owned, so that's why this model is a bit special to me. But not only that, this miniature was meant to be part of my Nippon army for the old world. After having painted this guy, I will not be doing it, I think. This guy pushed my limit and my patience. So let me first get the character card out of the way. So here is the fabled samurai for Talisman. He's very cool. He gets, let me see if I can put it there. Awesome. So he gets to shoot, which is similar to the centaur, and he can stun people using karate, which means he can prevent spellcasters from doing their shenanigans. Painting wise, as you can tell from the artwork, he has a ton of detail in freehand, the non-metallic, and the armor. So he was a challenge because actually I'm not sure if the armor actually is red. When I looked at my biggest source of inspiration, Old Hammer in Toronto, he painted it almost like a reddish brown. So I decided to do something different and lean more into bright colors. So let's go grab the miniature and see if you guys can, maybe I should put him there. So let me just zoom in actually. I think that's the best course of action. So for the miniature, I am beyond happy with how all the freehand, I guess flowers or checkered patterns, I'm not sure what to call them. I also did the black polka dots you see in the artwork on his white gloves. And on the bow, it's very hard to see I guess where he holds the bow, there is a little bit of green leaf work. I did a little bit onto the miniature, I'm not sure. Oh, you can see it a little bit there. So this guy was very extensive, from the non-metallic chainmail on one arm to the crazy yellow color, to the red, and all of the blue, having about 3 different highlights just to make them pop. Now I could have definitely done a lot more when it comes to the highlighting of the blue, but my new painting method for the past about 100 models has been highlight to where I'm happy and stop. So my old self, I would have highlighted the blue probably 3 more steps to almost a pure white. But I'm trying to lean away from the very, very pure, almost neon highlight. Even my fiance Sam, she's seen all of my painting styles and she thinks the crazy white is too much. And at first I was worried about it, but the more I look at these guys, I'm happy with the metals having that pure white and everything else a bit muted. One other element to the model that I'm really happy with is the, I guess, scabbard of his katana. It's like a tiger pattern, which is really cool. Again, I could have made the orange a bit brighter, but I was fairly happy with how all the colors interacted with each other. And then of course we have his green pants below. So this guy just overall was a lot of work, and beyond happy with him again. Excited to play with him, and maybe hypothetically down the line I would make a 500 point Nippon army for the old world, just because I do not want to paint these guys. I don't want to paint more than maybe 20 or 40 of these guys. So here's the samurai for Talisman. Up next will be the swashbuckler, and here is the swashbuckler for Talisman. Let me get the card out. So the swashbuckler is, I think, like such a simple model, but has a ton of charm and character. So the way they sculpted the face and the whole pose There's so much arrogance behind it, but I love it a lot. I feel like you don't see that as much anymore, but just the simplicity as well. When you look at the clothing he's wearing, it's so basic, yet you can have a lot of fun with it. Game-wise, this guy is fairly simple. He's more combat-oriented, and he gets more chances to get adventure cards, which is pretty cool. Model-wise, like I just mentioned, I like everything about him, from the pose to the clothing choice. So when we zoom in, the colors of his like fatigue, that was such an interesting challenge for me to paint. So I started off with, I believe, Xandri Dust, highlighted all the way up to Uriel Yellow. Then I watered down, I believe it was Squig Orange, used that as a glaze and focused it towards the bottom. After the glaze dried, it muted everything, so I went back with Uriel Yellow and highlighted just the tops. So that was such a fun new way to discover how to paint like this almost golden looking clothing. Of course, his cloth is simple. It's just the, I want to say, the Rakarth Flesh alternative I use. Shadow wash and then highlight up to pallid. One other part I'm quite proud of is actually his socks. I just followed the artwork, and why I really love these Talisman miniatures, because I'm following the artwork, I never would have done these color choices. So even going back to the Samurai, this Swashbuckler, it forced me to do these like goofy looking socks for the freehand. So I really enjoyed that. Every miniature so far has pushed me out of my comfort zone, and now that when I paint other old Hammer miniatures, I want to incorporate elements I'm learning from each of these guys. So fairly straightforward. Again, the blue, it was McCraig blue highlighted all the way up to, I want to say, rust gray. I could go more extreme to Beheroth blue, but I'm just happy with how the whole tone works. And then again, looking at the sword, I like how my non-metallic and the facial skin tones are the main focus of these miniatures. So that's the Swashbuckler. I know I talked more about the painting aspect, but this model was quite fun to paint and I did not expect that. So up next, I'm going to share with you the Saracen. So up next is the, I believe it's pronounced now, Saracen. This guy is the Slaver in Talisman, and I love his Persian, Turkish, Ottoman, I guess, inspired heritage and armor. Now, already you can look at the artwork, beautiful color choices and a beautiful shield. Then when you look at my miniature, very different shield. So when we look at the model, it is one of my favorite miniatures. I've actually have a couple more. I want to make a warband specifically with these miniatures or similar-esque, as I do think it will be fun to paint and use in so many different games. So when we look at him, I had a lot of fun painting his robes. I think the robes are the biggest selling point of the miniature. And color-wise, I'm very proud of what I did. But when we look, and then the non-metallic, I should say, is slightly different. It's going back to my blue recipe. That's because I'm following the artwork, and in this one, it definitely has a blue steel, not a typical dirty steel. Now the shield, let me zoom in a bit. The shield was such a fun part to paint, as using the GW shields, I don't want to make the exact shield in the artwork if there isn't a already produced plastic shield from Citadel's various ranges. Maybe that's the pure Citadel side of me, maybe that's the lazy side, but for this miniature I decided to play around with freehand. So when I zoom in some more, I made the stub that the shield glues to. Of course, I'm leading to gems for every single one, but for the freehand, I thought it'd be cool to have almost like a serpent. I believe these guys might be fighting also near the Mediterranean or the coast, because these are slavers. They do deal with, the trade, so I assume they go to ports, and because they're by the water, I wanted something similar to like a Man o' War or Dreadfleet. So I painted this bone-like serpent, and then to tie it in, I used the same cloth color and just added a few glazes. Very simple, but I think it does work out. Everything else I'm very happy with. The non-metallic came out great. The blue and the green fatigues, a very fun model, and I do, like I mentioned already, I'm going to paint a few more, and I think I will record it just because this model I had a ton of fun painting. So up next will be the Rogue. So up next is the Rogue for Talisman, and I keep saying it, but another very fun paint job and a fantastic model. I think truly Talisman is one of the best ranges that Citadel has ever sculpted and produced, because every single miniature I've been painting has motivated me to paint more and more. If I could help it, I'd make a whole army for the old world or any game system with just these miniatures. So the Rogue in the game, fairly simple. He can steal spells, average strength and craft. So to me, very generic, but he starts in the tavern, which I guess is cool. Model and paint wise, love the pose of the miniature, and they did a great job, Ali Morrison, for sculpting everything to match the art. Painting wise, very fun challenge. Looking at it, the model is kind of cloaked in darkness, but I wanted to avoid that. The easy way would just be throwing dark shades and tones. So I thought, well, what if he was in the sunlight? What would he look like? So when we look at the miniature, I think actually this might be one of my better painted faces. Maybe that's because the model itself is sculpted so well. But besides the face, I had to do the stubble. Let me see if I can. So under the chin and, oh, sorry, my hand, on his bulbous head, I had to mix in the flesh tones with black and grays and highlight it up and almost use it as like a shade and glaze. Really happy how that turned out. Then the fleshy robe color, I believe it was just Doombull brown, highlighted up with actually elf flesh from Vallejo. Then the boots are, I want to say Xandri dust, highlighted up to Zamesi desert with a little bit of bone white. Had a lot of fun doing the freehand for his little scarf. And of course the non-metallic I think is becoming such an integral part of my paint style, where it's so highly contrasted with the white while everything else is a little bit muted. I'd say my skin tones are still leaning closer to that crazy white highlight, but everything else I like it to be medium highlight / muted. So this model, fantastic sculpt, a lot of character, and honestly just badass looking. So that was the Rogue for Talisman. Up next is the Dark Elf. So the Dark Elf for Talisman is fantastic. He can reduce characters' strength and craft when he beats them in combat, and then he can drain the life out of his followers. I should note that the artwork is very goofy. I do love it. Something that's quite different, and I'd say it gave me a small painting challenge. The skin tone almost looks exactly like the metal. So now when we look at the miniature itself, I had to kind of work around that slight challenge. So like I mentioned, let's start with the shield. I kept the peg shield, but when I looked at the artwork, I didn't like how it's like an eye in the middle. It would of course follow the art, but I decided to go with a gem. I feel like I've been leaning to gems on every single miniature so far. And then just painted this swirling vortex to match the art, and I do love how it came out. It's quite striking, and it's, again, each model I paint is giving me more and more inspiration for how I want to paint a lot of miniatures moving forward. The glove and the boots were fairly simple. It was a base coat of the colors and then just 2 highlights. Pretty straightforward. I wanted to keep the pastel look. And then when we look at the main focus would be the armor. So very proud of the gold. It was just very straightforward, but making sure I got the light placement to add a lot of contrast. And then the armor, I actually had to lean into more of a black tone. I still highlighted up with the steel color, but if you can tell on the sword and the shield outline, I intentionally left more black showing just to provide contrast to his blueberry face. The blueberry face still used a lot of the similar colors, but I started with an actual blue, so McCraig blue as a base coat, and highlighted up. Yeah, so that's pretty much the painting process of the guy. The green was quite unique. I had to use two different contrast paints to get the tone, then put a Thonian camo shade to add that, I guess, like dirty brown olive look, and then highlighted it up. So pretty nice. I'm very proud of the model. And then the sword, it's such an awkwardly sculpted sword because there is a raised ridge going through the middle of it, and typically the way I paint metal, it wouldn't work too well, so I decided to highlight all the edges and then throw some of that cartoony white lines to make it look like it's obsidian or it's just shimmering. My logic is this character in Talisman drains you of life and followers, so obviously the sword is corrupted or it's magical. But such a great model, I probably would hunt down one more of them just to paint up, as it'd be cool to have a small entourage of these dark elves in Otherworld and even fantasy or any other game. So the last miniature is the Druid from Talisman. So the last character for Talisman I painted is the Druid. This guy is cool because he can toggle on and off whatever alignment he wants to be. I think that is such a unique ability that actually helped me in my last game of Talisman. This guy also got the name of Cabbage Head. That's because he has the wreath on his head and he's holding like a head of lettuce or a cabbage. I'm not entirely sure. Painting wise, I really like the direction they took the model. It's not quite all white, but it's leaning into these nice blue and purple tones. So when we look at the miniature, I think he's one that turned out fairly well. Starting from the face, love the facial sculpting detail. It really accents how well the sculptor can work with the medium. And when you paint, it's just such an enjoyable treat. The texture in the cloth as well is fantastic. I had to play around with getting the tone correct. I think I managed to get it. Definitely leaning a little bit darker on this miniature. He used a lot more washes than I usually would use in my paint jobs. That's because I wanted to follow the art, but I think that was the only way to break up all the tones. Besides that, the guy was fairly simple. Compared to the other 5 miniatures I shared with you, he isn't that impressive, but I still really do enjoy the way he turned out. It's just that after discussing the rest of the miniatures, he kind of falls a little bit short in detail. I'd say the only cool thing is actually the head of lettuce or whatever herb he cut. I don't think any other miniature in Citadel, maybe besides the halfling cooks from the Dogs of War, but not many dudes are holding like a head of lettuce or a vegetable. So very fun painting, and I'd say just the beard color and everything, it's such a fun model. So I can use this to paint many other wizards throughout the Citadel line of miniatures. There you guys have it. I hope you enjoyed my quick painting update. I had such fun painting these 6 models for Talisman. I have many more in the works. So until then, I hope you liked the video. Please comment and subscribe if you enjoy the content. And I have hopefully a few battle reports and more miniature showcases on the horizon.